In this tutorial, I'll show you how to represent cost structures and product costs in legal text. I will also cover important considerations for drafting your clauses, taking into account the capabilities and features that Mercenta provides. This tutorial is aimed primarily at lawyers who will be drafting legal text for their organizations. If you're a cost structure designer, you will also find these topics helpful to gain a greater insight into how your designs will be used. In order to follow along, you'll need to be familiar with legal text templating, cost structures and product costs. If these are gaps in your knowledge, I recommend that you review the legal text, cost structure design and product costing tutorials before continuing. Before I go on, there is an important housekeeping matter to mention. Natasha and I will be touching on various legal topics, including the setup of a fictitious agreement. None of us are lawyers, nor does Mercenta provide any legal services. Therefore, nothing in this tutorial should be interpreted as constituting legal advice. Please read and accept Mercenta's disclaimer in the description of this video before continuing. Right, let's jump in. In any supply agreement, the determination of selling prices is based on various factors, including the supplier's pricing model, their underlying assumptions, and the product's unique design or manufacturing requirements. Translating this to Mercenta language, we call those elements the cost structure, the attribute values, and the product configuration. In traditional business environments, these elements were not shared for various reasons, including concerns over leakage of proprietary information, perceived loss of leverage, or the party's preference to avoid assuming pricing risk. I'd also like to say that in the past, platforms like Mercenta to facilitate sharing of this information within the context of supply agreements hasn't been available. In these types of environment, poor quality pricing, from the perspective of the buyer, may go undiscovered for some time, until the buyers renegotiate prices, usually as a result of cost breakdown analysis or new market information. How price errors and indeed any price adjustments generally are handled in legal text during the term of the agreement varies. Some contracts include provisions for productivity, most favored nation, competitive quote, and material price formulas to handle adjustments or corrections. Of course, you can take this approach with Mercenta, but you can also leverage our software to work with your counterparties in a more transparent and collaborative way. The integration of this new approach into your legal language is the topic we will explore next. First up, it goes without saying that it's crucial for the parties to verify the correctness of the calculated prices before approving a proposal. To facilitate this review process, I highly recommend that you include a provision granting the buyer the right to audit the attribute values and product configuration at any time prior to proposal approval and during the term of the agreement. This provision should also allow for site visits to personally verify the data. That's all well and good, but what if errors are discovered after the effective date? You could go with the tough luck approach since the proposal is already approved. But errors can go both ways, and let's not forget that the parties have shared the price calculation information on Mercenta, indicating their intention to work together in a spirit of partnership. To allay this concern, you should include an acknowledgement in the legal text that outlines the elements involved in the price calculation, the reliance on third-party processing, and provisions for dispute resolution and remedies in case any errors are discovered before or after the effective date. In the dispute resolution section, you may need to outline different approaches depending on whether the pricing errors affect a few or many products and the scale or total impact of the error. A lot of this depends on whether the error occurred in the cost structure, attribute values, product configuration, or in very rare cases, in the data processing performed by Mercenta. Resolving product configuration issues are typically straightforward, and by definition, they should only affect one product. In these cases, it's usually evident when the wrong configuration has been applied. At the other end of the scale, errors in the cost structure, such as formula mistakes or in the data processing, can have a widespread impact, necessitating the repricing of multiple products. In exceptional circumstances where the magnitude of the issue is substantial and affects a significant portion of the agreement, the parties may have the option to declare an epidemic or invoke special circumstances that warrant the suspension of the agreement. Far more common, but fortunately much more benign, are errors in the attribute values. To head off future arguments, you should spell out exactly how the supplier should collect the manufacturing data. For example, you should require that manufacturing data should be taken from actual measurements or good faith estimates for new products from the factory floor, and that the supplier should calculate the average measurements taken for different qualified workers over multiple production lots, leaving out non-value adding activities such as setup and quality inspection, which the supplier is able to reasonably control. To avoid arguing over the minutiae, a good strategy is to allow for a global allowance of say 2% buffer as a efficiency loss factor applied to all materials and processes. With that in place, disputes should be rare. You could allow for good faith negotiations to establish equitable values, where for example you could just offer to go halves. In rare cases, where the parties can't agree, you may need an escalation clause to allow for verification by third parties. Once the correct values are established, you should require the parties to create a new proposal, correct the error, and submit the proposal for approval. This ensures the agreement is up to date and that future proposals would reflect the correct baseline. In some cases, to avoid unnecessary price churn, you may wish to set a future effective date for the proposal if the impact of the price change falls within a predefined collar. Your dispute resolution process should also address remedies if invoices have already been paid at the wrong prices. In such situations, it may be fair to consider some form of impact sharing arrangement so that the financial consequences of the pricing error are shared. Depending on legal advice, you may consider including all or part of the cost structure, attribute values, product configuration, including its generated formulas in the appendices section of the agreement. However, this is generally unnecessary as Mercenta already stores all this data in a more accessible format. Before we get into the demo, let me give you an overview of the schema for the cost structure and product cost data so you'll know how to use it in your templates. I will primarily focus on the schema for the cost structure and product costs, along with their related fields. Cost structures rely heavily on attributes and resources, so if that's a gap in your knowledge, I encourage you to refer to the tutorials on drafting legal text for those entities as well. In the displayed proposal schema, I have included only the essential elements, excluding most of the data, so I can focus on the key points. Now, let's direct our attention to two important fields, price round and price UOM. Price round is not technically a part of the cost structure, it falls under the agreement properties, but it plays a crucial role in displaying prices within your legal text. Mercenta doesn't round any values, so they may appear lengthy when rendered in your legal documents. To display them more appropriately, you can utilize the math.round function along with this field to round the prices. The price UOM field is updated each time the cost structure is rolled up. It represents the unit of measure of the selling prices of the products. If any errors occur during the roll-up, this field will be empty, but it could only be empty when you're working on the proposal, because Mercenta prevents you submitting a proposal for approval when the cost structure is invalid. Also at the top level of the proposal are two lists, the cost structure and the buying parties. I'll examine these two lists in more detail since they contain the bulk of the information you'll need for your legal text. Now that we've covered the top-level schema, let's delve deeper into the cost structure. To see what's going on, I've populated it with a minimal set of data to show you its format. As I mentioned earlier, the cost structure is a hierarchical arrangement of cost items. But to make it easier for you to find and loop through the items, we have flattened it into a list format. In this flattened form, we introduce two fields to preserve the hierarchical relationships. First, each cost item has a parent field which points to its parent using the cost item ID. In the example here, this cost item is at the top level, so its parent is null. We have also included a level field which indicates the depth of each cost item within the hierarchy. This field can be useful if you wish to indent your listing of cost items using the string pad left function. In addition to these helper fields, there are three others that I want to raise to your attention: the unit of measure, the attributes, and the formula. The UOM field is updated whenever the cost item is rolled up. Similar to the price UOM field, it may be empty if an error occurs, but it should never be empty when the proposal is submitted for approval. The attributes here are the list of product cost item attributes defined for this cost item. While only one attribute is shown here, there of course may be many in the list. Note that the formula result attribute is not included since it is system managed, but you won't need it, because its unit of measure is automatically copied to the cost item's unit of measure field. The attribute specification follows a key value pair format, which you probably won't want to display directly. To address this, Mercenta provides a function called humanize, available in the snippets. You can use this function to convert the specification into a readable English sentence within your legal text. So if you humanize this example, you'll get something like a number between 10 and 20 with a unit of measure of seconds per each. The formula contains a list of formula items, although only one is shown here. You'll recognize the math operator and details of the attribute within each formula item. Finally, the most important area from a legal text perspective are the product costs. These contain the products that the buying parties have agreed to buy under the terms of the agreement, along with their selling prices. Once again, I have populated the example on the right with a minimal set of data to explain the format. The company, Neptune, has a single product cost. The first field that you'll immediately notice is the price. This price is updated when the product cost is rolled up. Again, it will be empty if any errors occur during the roll-up, but this can only occur when the proposal is being authored. The second field I'd like to highlight are the attribute values for the product cost attributes. As it is a number attribute, Mercenta automatically includes its unit of measure, saving you the need to look it up. In this case, the unit of measure is dimensionless. Now, let's shift our focus to the product cost structure. The product cost structure is a mirror image of the cost structure, except that it's configured to suit the product. Like the cost structure, it is flattened to help you find product cost items and to loop through them. To preserve the hierarchy, we've also provided the parent ID and level fields which you can use. In this example, I've only included one top-level product cost item, so its parent ID and level is null and 1 respectively. In addition to these two fields, there are a couple of other things that I want you to observe here. First, since it is an instance of a cost item, we have included the cost item's information here as well. This eliminates the need for you to look up that information separately. Secondly, take note of the listed product cost item attribute values along with their respective values. And finally, you can also see that the generated formula for the product cost item is listed. Here I've included only one formula item, but of course this list could be very long. Like the cost item formulas, you'll see the same math operator and attribute details, but what's different this time is that the entity for the attribute is also shown, along with its value. This value is the real number used in the generated formula to calculate the value of the product cost item and ultimately the price of the product, so you'll find this information very helpful from an audit perspective. That completes the data schema topic. I'll hand you over to Natasha, where she'll show you how to include what we just learned in your agreement's legal text.
Thanks, William. In this demo, I will guide you through the process of incorporating the cost structure and product costs into the legal text of our agreement. Starting off from the proposal main menu, click Legal Text in the Agreement section. When the form loads, you'll notice that I left the template section empty, so we have a clean slate. I won't be writing the text for the complete agreement in this demo. Instead, I'll be writing the legal language for some of the clauses which William mentioned, and I'll also create a list of the selling prices in the appendix. Before we get started, let me orient you on the tabs just in case this is the first time you've seen this. Clicking over to the Data tab, you can see that it is automatically populated with our agreement's data, so there's nothing to do here. Jumping over to the Style tab, you'll see that I've already pasted in some styling, so that the contract will be nicely styled when we view it later. Okay, back to the template. Before we get started, I'll set the document to auto-wrap so that I won't need to hit return at the end of each line. Also, I'll quickly add a predefined function which converts an attribute specification into human-readable text. You'll see it in action later. You won't have to worry about this for much longer, because in future, we will introduce global functions and styles, which you can use without adding them explicitly. Now that that's done, I'll scroll it out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. This is not a complete agreement. I'll only add clauses that are the focus of this tutorial. With that in mind, let's create the Products and Prices section. Notice that I've taken the unit of measure of the selling prices from the PriceUOM field in the agreement data. This is automatically populated when the cost structure is rolled up. My cost structure doesn't include any freight or packaging cost items, so I've also clarified that the prices are DDP. My wording here also emphasizes that the parties have carefully reviewed the prices before agreeing, and depending on your legal advice, that may be all you have to do. Let's now create the appendix, which I referred to in the main body. First, I'll make some room. And then I'll type the header and the introductory passage for the appendices. Here we want to make it clear that the appendices are an integral part of the agreement. Then I'll create the header for the product listing. Only the buying party can add products to the agreement, and because there may be more than one, we need to loop through them. To do this, I'll use a for loop, making sure I don't forget to close it. Then, for each loop of the party, I'll print their company name as a heading. Then for each party, we want to print a list of their products, along with the prices in table format. First the table header. Then create another subloop for the table rows. To render the document for the template we just created, click the View tab. You can see that the agreement's legal text has been rendered. The correct unit of measure is displayed, along with the price for the solitary product for the only party. The beauty of templating your legal text is that this document will be updated for you automatically whenever changes are made to the agreement. What we've done so far may be good enough, but as William suggested, let's add a section outlining the price calculation method, the possibility of errors, and what to do if they are discovered. Heading back to the template and scrolling back to the main body. The first clause acknowledges the elements involved in the price calculation. The second and third clauses cover the verification and audit requirements. And the final two clauses cover how the prices should be changed and how remedies are calculated. You can see here that I've placed the onus on the supplier to find and correct any errors, but I think I've been fair to share half of the impact. I won't add any clauses in this demo covering the measurement of the manufacturing data, because that's already covered in the attribute tutorial. And I'll also skip the dispute resolution section that I referred to, because that would take too much time. Let's see how it looks in the rendered document. Looks good. Finally, I'll show you how to add the product costs to the appendices. As William mentioned, we think this is unnecessary, but your legal advice may differ. Heading back to the template. Let me scroll back down to the appendices. First, I'm going to create the heading, Appendix 2. To add the product cost structure, I'm going to take a shortcut because Mercenta has already predefined it for us as a snippet. To insert the snippet, place the cursor where you want it inserted, then select the correct one from the list and click the Insert button. Right, let's see how it looks in the rendered document. Scrolling through the updated legal text, you can see that the new appendix have been added. As you can see, it's pretty verbose and difficult to display in a document, so you're probably better off leaving this data in Mercenta. That completes the last demonstration for this tutorial. I'll say my goodbyes now and hand you back to William for closing remarks.
Thanks, Natasha. With that, we've reached the end of this tutorial. Thank you for your attention and congratulations for staying until the end. Let's recap the topics we covered. First, we compared traditional supplier relationships with modern practices that promote transparency and collaboration. If you decide to go that route, we invite you to leverage our software to work transparently with your counterparties, particularly in terms of sharing the price calculation methodology, the key assumptions, and the product configuration. Next, we discussed important considerations when drafting the legal text for your agreements. This included listing calculated prices, incorporating supply obligations, and addressing price change mechanisms and dispute resolution. We also provided an overview of the schema for the cost structure and product cost data, empowering you to effectively use this data in your legal text templates. By now, you should be well equipped to draft legal text for your cost structures and product costs in your agreements. It's time to put these insights into action and enhance your agreements for better collaboration and transparency. Thank you and goodbye.